sure we're doing everything right.
Okay, perfect. What about you guys hiding in the light back there? So this is interesting. This is an interesting little test we just had here. So instead of sitting up front in the dark, you'd rather sit in the back where it's really bright and probably just as hot. So what are you guys doing back there? Project-wise, not while you're sitting back there. Anybody? Out of the 18 of you back there, nobody? What do you guys think? You just randomly wandered in this room because...
New mobile application. I mean, we're starting to roll out new devices. Some company owns some. Christmas, and everybody got out there.
Yep.
So right now we're working through a VPN.
Okay. And when you say mobile applications, are these applications that you guys are using as an organization that are custom that you're pushing out, or just...
We're looking to develop some mobile applications. Right now, we're trying to make web apps so people can use mobile applications.
All right, anybody else before we get started? All right. So, I already told you who I am. I'm Jennifer with Carolina Advanced Digital. I think we actually have a couple slides on our company if you're not familiar with us. Yeah. This is working 2 seconds ago. Here we go. So our company is based here in North Carolina. We've expanded in the past 18 months or so. We have offices in other states, but we mostly do infrastructure and security stuff. So if it's connected to something and it goes over a network, whether it's wired, wireless, remote access, SSL, VPN, all that good stuff, that's what we do. We're doing a lot of wireless stuff for a long time. As far back as in the 90s, pre-standard, we were Intel wireless providers. So we've been doing this kind of stuff for a while. Obviously, on the infrastructure side, we've got about almost 30 years in that niche. I do a lot of infrastructure security specifically. So our company does everything from network design and development to helping manage, and we sell product, of course. Where I come in is mostly on the security side. So I was one of the authors of the CISSP official courseware. There are 20 of us internationally that wrote that, and then I have some other places that I write things for. So if you're interested in the security aspect of it, there may be some resources around that I can point you to that have the stuff for you. Okay, so the main goal of this talk is really centered around security and maintaining security as we enter the world of consumerization and mobile everything. BYOD is one part of it, so we're going to talk in a minute about the difference between BYOD and consumerization, and I always love input on that. Okay. Hi.
Hello.
Come on in to the sauna. Let's see how the clicker's still here. Okay, so the BYOD and consumerization piece here, I do like to just spend 30 or 45 seconds laying a little bit of groundwork and making sure that we're all using the same words. So, let's stand over here for a minute. So as I mentioned, they're very similar, but they're not the same thing. So when we talk about BYOD, and when you were talking about what you guys are doing, I said that can mean a lot of different things to different people. So BYOD, of course, this slide is kind of a just slide. If people are bringing, usually this is personally owned devices in. Bring your own device, meaning you own it, you brought it in. However, there are other trends happening, which would be maybe you didn't bring your own device, but we're going to give you a device that may be considered a consumer-grade device. Like we're going to give out iPads for you to use, but we own it as the county. You guys are allowed to use it. You turn it back in just like you would a laptop or something else. So this is interesting. This is a graph that I pulled out of wherever that was, some analysis chart they did in a survey. So this is probably a year or two old at this point, but what you see is the question, if you can't read at the back, does your company allow employees to use their personal devices for work-related activities? And what you'll see up here is that 56 said yes and 44% said no. So what does that tell you?
A little bit more toward a yes. You supply the hardware.
Yes. Well, this says personally owned devices.
Well, that's what I meant.
The employees provide devices. Okay. activities?
Emails
Email?
would be it. We have a Citrix receiver or something like that.
Okay, so like a virtual desktop application. Okay, so when I look at this, it tells me pretty much nothing. Because what are work-related activities? What do you mean allow the use of? So what I usually hear from especially the commercial side, the private sector is, well, we don't really have a policy for this, but we know people are doing it, but we really don't know to what extent and what they have access to once they get on. So we know that they're bringing their Christmas gifts in, and they were getting on our network and they're doing stuff, but we didn't really tell them they could do that, to what extent they could do it, and we're not really securing or monitoring it. So these kind of charts are very vague. You know, do you allow? Well, allow, so that means you would have a policy written that says you can allow it. But it's not very telling, because this isn't defined. So we've had in the past, actually I'll come back. So consumerization really is the trend of now we have consumer devices that everybody thinks are really cool, and they are getting pushed up into the enterprise, right? You don't have to read all that, but you can if you want to. So traditionally that's backwards, right? Traditionally the big companies had all the big money, all the cool things, and that technology would evolve over time, get to a point that it was more affordable and could be packaged in smaller, physically smaller devices, and then used at the consumer, at the personal level, right? So this is backwards. This is completely backwards than what we had before. Now we're trying to use iPads that hit, you know, Walmart or Best Buy first in the enterprise. We're not getting the enterprise technology pushed down. That's a huge change in the mindset, especially the people managing it. So you guys are saying, who's going to manage the platform? How are we going to secure it? Suddenly I find, you know, our company, who's always traditionally been Windows, of course, with some Linux stuff, and now I have to manage fruit because we do have a BYOD policy. And so people bring their fruit in, and it is up to me to figure out how to use fruit and configure it. So there is a couple of articles here. I have a blog site if you guys are more interested in digging in here. And the best, actually, let me stop there. The best example I can give you of consumerization as opposed to BYOD is we all know what the BYOD is. The best example I can give you was a hospital that I was working with when they were here in the state. And they wanted to roll out these tablets. So we did a new wireless system, a new this, a new that. Everything's secured. It's locked down. It's freaking fantastic. It's beautiful. And but it was new, right? They didn't have all the wireless devices. We're going to get new wireless devices. I said, okay. When you get the new wireless devices, just give us a call. Let us know. Have an engineer come on site. We'll test everything for you in a controlled environment before you give them to non-IT people to go right around the hospital and use. So the idea is that they have these tablets for the doctors and physicians to use, which is what a lot of hospitals are doing these days, right? So they didn't exactly do that. They bought a bunch of tablets and they gave them to the people to use across the hospital, and we never knew about it until we got a phone call that the wireless isn't working. I get a lot of those phone calls. I get a lot of those phone calls from some of you guys. But in this particular case, what that meant was, you know, this was the first major rollout of wireless stuff, and they weren't working. Well, finally, I went down myself. Sorry, I got ice in my mouth now. There's only so much remote troubleshooting you can do on the wireless side. So I went down there, I opened one of these tablets up, I tried to connect to the secured network, which, you know, 8021X for a hospital, and the thing blue screen immediately. And I thought, well, that's very odd. Well, now we have a whole cart of these things. So I pull out the next one, I do the same thing, the next tablet, blue screen. So I pulled out I went through 10 tablets and documenting every one of them by their, you know, asset numbers and everything. And the short story, what we finally figured out was that these tablets would not work on 802.1x secure networks. Just wouldn't do it. You could do a pre-shared key, you could do an open network, you could do anything else, but they would not do 802.1x, which is what we need in a hospital environment, right? Patient data, all that good stuff. So we tried to proxy the conversation with the makers of this tablet, and they basically came back. Now this really has to do with the NIC, the wireless network card that's in the tablet, more so than the tablet itself. But they basically came back to us and to the customer and said, well, it's really a consumer device. It gets sold at Best Buy. We're not going to fix that. So then the hospital has two choices. Okay, they're not going to fix this problem. So either we drop down some of the security and put other things in place to try to lock it down more. Use these tablets, use something like a pre-shared key, do some additional monitoring, which is less secure, and keep the tablets, or we have to send every single one of them back and buy something else. Now, I don't know what you guys would have done, but we have really good customers, and that hospital sent every one of those tablets back and got something else. But that's a perfect example of consumerization. So that was a consumer-grade product. Now, on the paperwork and in the box, it would say, yes, it does this kind of wireless and it does this kind of security. But in application, it didn't work, and we see this all the time. They're not very interested in fixing it. That's not where the revenue is coming from for that product line, right? They're getting their money from the Best Buy sales, not from you as an organization buying it for your enterprise. So are we all on the same page with the whole BYOD versus consumerization? BYOD being usually a personally owned device coming in and being allowed some type of access to the network for resources for work purposes. Okay. So, I do always like to throw this up. Being on the technical side of things, I think that we all do kind of lose sight occasionally when we see security things and we see buttons and knobs we can turn and push and blinky lights that we can make happen. We really like to start doing that. It's fun. I call it total network domination when we talk about NAC stuff. So I do like everybody to kind of remember as we talk about these things that security is really operating within the technology realm, which is part of business. So our main goal in what we're doing and why we're here today is to facilitate the technology for the role and the goals of the business, not to inhibit it. And I think that's key. And I don't know about you guys in government as much. One of the big things that we deal with in the private sector is you can't affect the business. You can't affect that bottom line. The first time you turn on something that makes something else not work, and that revenue drops or that production drops, you're in big trouble. They will accept a huge amount of risk on the security side in order to maintain availability and production on the business side. So the next thing I realized as I started hosting peer sessions at places like RSA and some of the national and international conferences on BYOD and consumerization, one of the things I found was that everybody got really, really wrapped up in trying to solve all of the problems of security that we had that already existed in mobile devices and smartphones and everything else. So one of the things that I said is really important for us as we're doing BYOD or VM technologies is we need to focus on the delta. What's different? Don't try to go back and secure everything that was already a problem, that we've already accepted a risk for, right? So examples. They say, well, but if somebody brings their personally owned device in, they could take a file with all of these records and they could email it to themselves. Well, they can do that now, can't they? Right? Unless you have something like a DLP program. So there's a lot of things that are security concerns that we have, but if we focus too much on the security concerns we already had before and not enough on what that delta, what the difference is now in the personally owned device, you're going to get bogged down and you are going to be fighting a giant, giant animal for a long time. You're not going to move forward. So some of the difference here, rabbit hole picture. So some of the differences here, I'd like to hear from you guys because I think these are some of the challenges you're dealing with. Right? You said, one of the things you said was, who's going to manage it? Right? Did you say that or did you say that? You did. Okay. So who's going to manage it? That's a concern. That's different. That's new. What rights do we have if it's something like a cell phone? You know, do we have the right to monitor the GPS on it? Do we have the right to view the text messages on it? Do we have the right to delete everything or wipe it? Yeah. And there's not a lot of clear-cut answers to this. So it's interesting. I assume in the next 24 months or so, as these programs are getting rolled out, that there's going to be some arguments as people have enrolled in BYOD programs and they either leave the organization or terminated, and phones start getting wiped, or kids' photos start disappearing off of iPads. I assume there's going to be some court battles over this type of thing. Have you guys gotten to a point where you've dealt with that yet?
Well, there's something called the selective way that you can do that will remove, like, say, the corporate email or corporate apps that you might push down to them, but and leave their stuff, leave their personal stuff alone.
Yeah, and that kind of works.
Yeah, kind of.
And it really depends on the type of the device and the operating system it's running. So actually, in our organization, we have that. If it's an employee-owned device, and that's how it's registered in the system. Full disclosure, we use AirWatch. We're an AirWatch reseller. I love it. So we can remote wipe just the corporate data. However, the way that the containers are done in these operating systems that we use, if I email Susan, who's standing back there, a customer list, and she opens it on her phone and it saves kind of locally, or a photo or anything else for that matter, and it's not containerized as part of the corporate stuff, once I delete the corporate data off of her phone, all that other stuff is still left there. So we have a clause in our legal document that basically says if we feel there's an extreme risk for anything, we have the right to do a full wipe on a device. I've heard a lot of other crazy things from some of the private sector that are doing this. You guys have anything? Well, let me ask this. You said you're starting to roll this out. What protections do you have in place, or what kind of legal documents? I don't want to get into the legal stuff, but kind of what's the verbiage that protects you or lets you do things to the device?
Well, nothing per se yet that I'm aware of, but we know that's going to come down the road in the future and stuff like this. We can allow them to have them. One of the biggest things, like Georgetown they're talking about, we can do selective wipes. And basically taking a consumer iPad and we install stuff out there, their email or whatever, or push an app, and we go back and remove that. But they're also told we have these programs there, and we can do this.
Okay.
We've actually, not even gotten to the policy part of it yet, but you think about something just as simple as the accuracy of email on all these Android content and stuff that people have made requests, got a supervisor or approval, have that put on there, and just take it from the same place as possible. Set our exchanges where that feature that's actively turned on by default is selectively turned on. Where if you are the smart person that tries to just do it yourself, sorry, you're going to get smacked in the face by warnings and errors. But the next step for us is with the MDM as far as that wiping feature, additional wiping capabilities other than just wiping the exchange part of the we've not got to that point yet because we just don't have that quite built yet.
Yeah. Well, let me ask this because sorry, go ahead first.
Doesn't AirWatch have like a enterprise container that you can store corporate documents in, like, that you would share it down to a device, then they leave, and you can wipe that container completely?
Yeah.
I know on an iPad they can.
Yeah, that AirWatch, which is one of the MDM providers, you has more advanced settings where you can containerize some of the stuff. Yes, that is true.
One of the things we've been dealing with is, I know a lot of people are drop boxes, making me crazy. You've got shared drop boxes, and I'm really concerned. And what we've been talking about is a private cloud looks like our only solution. I don't know any other way to get around it, and that's one of the things I'm struggling with.
So are the Dropboxes being used internally or?
It's being used internally and externally
Okay.
by our city council, by our clerks, admin clerks.
Okay.
And they're doing shared drop boxes where they're all putting things in the same drop box. We have no control. We can't even get into it.
Okay.
We even had a problem with Dropbox where someone shared out where it synced with their county asset and their home asset. Well, their home computer got infected and it uploaded them and infected us on the county side.
Yep. So there's two problems there, and I don't want to get too far off topic because this is kind of related and kind of going down a different path. But yes, with a lot of the Dropbox type of services, you can, well, there's a method in and out of your network that you're not privy to or don't have access to because somebody set this up as a private user. Let me come back to that in a second. And then secondly, yes, these things that sync, like sync your this to your phone and sync your this to your iPad and sync your this to your television and your toaster and everything else. Absolutely, if a piece of malware gets somewhere, it's spreading everywhere else, and then probably they're accessing it to or from a resource that's on your network, and then you've got the problem of it propagating on your network depending on how malware spreads. So let's talk about this offline, but I will throw this out to you. There are places, in fact, we've been using ShareFile for a long time, which is now a Citrix product, that would give somebody, maybe the IT or department head, kind of a root access to everything and give visibility into, and it has full auditing of who accessed and who uploaded what, when, and how. I recommend that type of thing. It doesn't have to be that solution, that type of thing for a lot of people. It's what we use. And in fact, the only reason that we have access in our network to, that people can get to Dropbox and stuff externally, because you can block that at your firewall. The only reason that we have access to it is because you guys use it a lot. So customers will want to upload a bunch of stuff to us, and if they're, for whatever reason, aren't using our share file system, we have to let our engineers be able to get that information. And then what you have is a completely different thing that we don't have a good answer for. So, but let's talk more about that after this. So anything else that you guys are kind of worried about that's new, that you feel is new or newly introduced with either BYOD or consumerization? Yeah.
We'd be interested in the VMware product that's being developed where you can run two virtual machines on the phone. One would be your corporate, one would be personal, and they would be completely isolated.
Yeah, so like a dual personality phone. And I've heard I heard noise probably 6 or 8 months ago with a couple of the wireless vendors that were going to be doing this. Wireless vendors meaning, cell phone wireless, Verizon, AT&T or somebody, that we're going to be working with the phone manufacturers to do this and have this kind of dual view personality thing going on. Has anybody seen that yet? 'Cause I heard a lot of noise a few months ago and then it kind of settled down. Did that go anywhere?
Good has a sandbox thing.
Yeah, so the MDM solutions will do it, but I'm talking about even a
Complete
step.
operating system.
Yeah, the phone OS is going to be doing it. Anybody seen that yet? No? Okay, so I've heard some noise. I'm kind of curious how that works, because that does look like fun. And, one of the problems we
I
had.
think that's only gonna be fun for IT.
Well,
Not for the MD.
okay, so here's an example. Our engineers now all carry their own cell phone. And or they have an option. We will give you a phone, but it's going to be a BlackBerry, whatever BlackBerry you want. Or you can do the BYOD program, you can enroll in that, agree to these terms, carry your own phone, but you need to have unlimited data and voice, blah, blah, blah. And we'll compensate you for that. But one of my engineers that was with us a couple years ago said, well, I had this incident. Now, I don't know the details of it. I didn't ask because I really didn't want to at that point. But basically what happened was somebody called his cell phone that at that time he was using as also a work phone, or had given it out, and he didn't know who it was. And I believe it was late at night, and there was either another person involved, like a girlfriend that maybe answered the phone, or somebody else was at I don't know the details. I didn't ask. But basically it was a personal situation where he was either out socially, at a restaurant or a bar, or he was with somebody, and the phone got answered in a way that it shouldn't have, and it was bad. So this kind of dual personality phone thing, I think, is interesting from a management perspective of you can kind of know and see. Then you've got these contacts in here, and these contacts in here, and if you need to at a certain time of night, switch your phone over and don't take the calls from this one if you need not to. So yeah, there's some ways to do that with the MDM technologies. I am curious to see what the phone vendors are going to do it. What else you guys got?
I've been hearing a lot of talk about required bring your own device, and organizations, corporate organizations, requiring people to provide their own tools. Have you heard anything about that?
I haven't seen anybody require it yet. Are you talking about in government,
Well,
education?
I've only been hearing about, there was a Gartner report that was in a magazine article I read last week, talking about finance officers are saying, why should we provide you with tools? This is part of your job. You should have your own tools.
Yeah. Okay, so if you guys couldn't hear that, the question being, are there organizations that are requiring BYOD, requiring people to, and I guess to a certain extent, yes, I have seen that. But usually that's in a contract position, not in a full-time employee position, where
The PDs, like the
police department
require their officers to have their own cell phone.
okay. So police departments requiring officers to have their own cell phone, and is it used also for work purposes, or at that
It's for
point?
work purposes,
Okay.
it's part of their.
So there's one example there,
And
even in
then
the.
the big concern is
public sector.
CJI on offers.
They don't have most of these, some have smartphones, some do not, but they are required to have personal phones, that way the agency can get in touch with them.
Yeah.
The agency provides one phone for the shift, the supervisor on duty or
Mhm.
whatever you want to call it, like the sergeant on duty or on shift. But the actual officers out in the field are required to have their own
example. And as far as in the public sector, that's really the only time I can think that makes sense. And I'm sure now that I'm thinking about it, I'm going to start asking people and get some more ideas here. In the private sector, of course, we can get away with a lot more than you guys can. So I don't see that happening anytime soon. And sometimes I have heard of programs that were planned and haven't been rolled out yet, where the organization, again, this is going to be private sector, not public, would specify a list of approved.
Pre-approved.
Yeah, you're going to buy your own device, but it needs to be one of these 5 things off this list if we're going to support it. So I have seen that, or at least in plans.
That way you're not trying to support different flavors of operating systems and
Yeah.
hardware, yeah.
Yeah, so one of the things, we're going to breeze through some of these slides coming up, but one of the things that's in here is, how we deal with the BYOD can mean different things. In fact, maybe what I'll do is let's go ahead and fast forward. So some of the stuff you guys were talking about, who's going to support and manage it, and dealing with different operating systems or versions. I mean, Android is bad enough just by itself.
Right.
But then you start talking about Windows this and Windows that and Apple this and Linux this.
Symbian and
Yes.
Microsoft Mobile.
So here's some of the things that we have to deal with, and this isn't even really getting into the nitty-gritty stuff. This is just kind of a random first things off the top of people's heads from a previous session, but patching, AV applications. So when I come back around, we'll see how some of this stuff may or may not actually apply, depending on how you roll out your BYOD. And then, of course, the responsibility of the users, if it is a personally owned device. Similarly to the Dropbox issue, I call it dirty dish rag, where the people take the laptop home, their kids start playing Angry Birds on it, and Angry Birds is loaded with malware, or even just using Facebook. So there's all kinds of stuff that can happen outside of the purview of the enterprise at that point. So the fears and risks, you guys have been pretty calm during this session as far as this. I've done a lot of peer sessions and peer groups where everybody get really riled up over different things, and it's pretty funny. So this session was put in there for those people. You guys seem too calm. I'm going to kind of skip through this. So this is where we got to really dig in to say, what are you really afraid of? Anything goes here. What's really eating at you? Because before, what I asked was, what's different? What's the delta? What are we dealing with now that we weren't dealing with before? And you guys did an excellent job. Usually, wow, you guys are awesome. Because usually everybody just throws out everything that there possibly could go wrong during a BYOD rollout. And that gets kind of dealt with there. And really it goes here. So, but some of the fears here, and I'm just going to click through some of this if I want to work today. These are some of the fears that people have. Now, again, some of these are things we were already dealing with, or at least partially already dealing with. And some of these are a little bit new and unique to BYOD and consumerization in the enterprise. So obviously, loss or theft of data, inappropriate use, licensing, getting down into here, the even help desk and support. So, one of the things when we do consulting, I had a conversation with people about, which was, you guys, this is a private company, you guys are all about productivity. So if you're telling people to bring their own device, and they got it from Best Buy or Walmart or Sam's, wherever, and something happens to it, it breaks, it won't work, the hard drive breaks, who knows, whatever happens, then that piece of device is out of commission for a while. So consumer grade support is usually not quite as good as enterprise grade support. So maybe they take it back, maybe they try to Geek Squad, they can't fix it. So 2 weeks later, maybe they're back up and running. What happened during that 2 weeks? Were they not working? Were they only working sometimes? Were they working from a spouse's or another household computer that's not secured, that you don't know about? Were they going to a public place and using, like a computer in the lobby of a hotel somewhere? What were they doing during that 2 weeks? You lost, as a company or organization, you lost something while that was going on. You either lost security or visibility, or you lost productivity. So are you willing to do that? So these are all kinds of different risks that we have when we talk about these programs, especially the larger stuff. So phones, one thing. I know we clutch onto our phones and we don't want to go anywhere without our phones, but really probably tablets, laptops, other computers, full-size devices are where we're really doing the meat of our work for most people, right?
But you pose a question too, like, say it's a consumer-owned, personal-owned device, and it totally crashes. You can't afford, some people can't afford just to go buy another one and get on the road again. They gotta go get it replaced or or fixed or something like that. If it can't, you're absolutely right. They're using something else.
Yeah. And who knows if they even have support. So what he's saying is if something
Right.
breaks, you may not even, as a person or a family, you may not have the resources available to just go out and buy another one, or to go out and have it fixed, or to replace a hard drive. You might be waiting those 2 weeks to your next paycheck, and that's why you waited 2 weeks to get it done. So there's all kinds of different things that happen here. And then, of course, we get down into the compliance and regulations, which I don't even want to touch. I'm going to leave that for Maurice and those guys to talk about. And I'm going to skip through this part. What I like to tell people, you guys tend to be a lot more business-oriented, even though you're technical. And I love that about you guys. You guys are really well-balanced. A lot of the groups I talk to are very technical, and we have to have this discussion and sit them down and talk about you can't go in and pour your heart out to the management team and tell them why you're so scared of something happening. You really need to do a little bit of analysis on it, even if it doesn't matter if it's qualitative or quantitative. At least something that makes a determination of how likely something is to happen and how bad it's going to be if it happens. And that has to do with the likelihood and the impact over here.
And that goes back to being enabler and disabler. Kind of.
Yeah. Yeah, and the funny thing is, so I have these moments, if Susan's still in here, is she still in here? No. Okay. So she'll tell you, internally I am the CISO of our company, so I'm responsible for making sure our stuff is secured, all of our customer stuff is secured. I am a little anal Nancy about it. I'm the first to freak out. The first time somebody says something, I'm the first one going, no, 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 no. Why not? I don't know, but no. Does it sound good? Pretty sure that's going to end up badly later. But I just calm down. It takes me a couple weeks sometimes. Go through this. So when the whole BYOD thing, no, 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 no. And I had to think about it from the business perspective and kind of step back and say, okay, what's the likelihood of this stuff I'm worried about happening? And then how bad is it if it does happen? So we've overcome some of my fears working through this process. But if you can take something that has a little bit more of a value, of a number to somebody, and at least let them know that you thought through it, even if you don't have a team. So the cool part is, with well, I say cool because I don't have to do it, with some of the large organizations we work with that are private sector, they have whole teams of people to do risk analysis. So you can give them a bunch of data and you can say, here, go analyze this. And they'll come back, usually a month later, it takes forever, and they'll come back and actually give you numbers and statistics on stuff, but most of us don't have access to that. So we just need to do something that lets people know we put a little bit of thought into it. Keep clicking through here. So the one thing I will do from this kind of slide set is highlight the highest risk values. So either whether you've mentally done it or actually done it on paper or somebody else has done a risk analysis for you, it's important when you start thinking about the type of solution you want when you're doing BYOD to really target the highest risk values. And I can say this in several different things. I say this when we talk about wireless. I say it when we talk about Mac. See what your hamburger is and don't worry about the french fries. If you need a hamburger, get a hamburger. Don't let somebody talk you into not getting a hamburger and getting fries in a shake. And that's very, very important because every one of these vendors out here on the floor will tell you they have a BYOD solution, and they have a yes solution, and they have a this solution, and they have a that solution. So understanding what your risk is, which may not be the same as the person next to you. So it's very interesting when you do peer sessions with all these different types of, so you guys are all kind of all government, some education here. But sometimes I do this and there's like large financial institutions and all kinds of different crazy things going on. And the risk that they have and the data that they're worried about varies greatly from one person to the next. And sometimes it's stuff I didn't even think about. So it's very important to just kind of target your solutions towards what your problem is. Okay, so I said that everybody down there has some kind of BYOD solution for mobile security or against access solution. I, being CISSP, am forced to always put this on one of my slides, so there it is. Pretty much everything is geared around either the integrity of the data, the availability of it, or confidentiality of it. So when you think about these solutions, we try to keep the triangle relatively equal and not get too bogged down in one or the other. So traditionally, here are some of the things that we've had to secure, mostly endpoints, right? The traditional stuff. So encryption, policies, remote access. Now, we have some of the more specific things, and here's where you're going to see the MDM, things like what he was talking about, Good, AirWatch, these different solutions, GPS tracking. There are some third-party utilities, virtual desktop. So what I did as we went through a few different large conferences and we started looking at everybody's BYOD solution and talking to people about what they were doing for BYOD, we kind of were able to lump everything into one of these categories. So most BYOD solutions, so either what you're looking for or what they're offering you, is either going to be MDM, VDI, some type of remote access control, Mac, or guest management. Is that fair? Is that what you guys think too? I'm always looking to add and expand on this list here. Anybody have anything different? Okay, so just kind of running through that. The MDM stuff usually sits on phones, tablets. Some of these I know the school systems use. I don't know if they're up here, but some of the ones that the school system use that are MDM will also load on the laptops to give them similar control there. So this is mostly traditionally phone-based for these vendors. Then the virtual desktop infrastructure. So I said earlier that, you know, what you need to worry about with the platforms and the security had a lot to do with how you tackle BYOD. So if you're using something like a VDI and people are just kind of being presented with an environment that's not living on their device, that's a different thing for us to worry about than we're actually running applications on their device, right? Does that make sense? So if we're running the application on the device, at least the application's on the device, possibly some of the data, possibly even encryption keys. If we're presenting them with an environment that's remote or virtual, we're not really worried about the operating system it's running on, as long as it can run that client. We're not really worried about the data that's being accessed or viewed because it's not on the device. Who's doing this?
We are, but there are some things you have to worry about, like if you enable printing or thumb drives, you know.
Oh, no, you can't print. No, that's not allowed.
I mean, you know, there are things that you have to keep in mind.
Oh, yeah.
You can also take screenshots. Yeah, there's things that you get around.
Oh, yeah. So to me, the biggest solution this solves is the platform solution. With, of course, the caveats that you've got, you know, drivers and fitters and things like that. So what kind of issues, and I'm always learning here, so we don't do this in our environment. What kind of issues, the printer one's a good one. What else do you guys see when you do this that's kind of a problem for you to work around or a challenge?
User interface.
That's a biggie, especially with phones.
Okay, so the user interface is not good, too small?
Too small.
Too small?
Yeah,
Okay.
just different amounts of people.
Okay, so you're presenting, what do you present when you're doing a phone VDI?
Well, basically, we're doing VM virtual desktops through View.
Okay.
And, you know, standard phone, it's very, very small. We have a lot of old people like me that can't see it.
And it's hard to navigate on a little tiny screen.
Oh, I can't even imagine trying to do that on the phone. What's the use case for that versus, you know, a tablet or a laptop?
Well, typically, we don't have the money to buy tablets and laptops, and we're trying to also, we have a lot of people that are really mobile. I'll tell you what we've been doing. This is kind of crazy, but what we found works for us is we have somebody in an office who's there most of the time taking support calls for another utility that we have. And we've started using text a lot because we were trying to get them to fill out, to use a browser and HTML5 and fill out a form. And we found out they really like to text in, okay, I'm finished with this work order. And the lady says, oh, they're finished with this work order. She has a queue. She fills it out and she texts them back saying, okay, I've marked you. Let me know when you get to the next one, you know.
Wow.
And it's working great.
Okay.
Low-tech solution.
Yeah, the new human-machine interface there. I like that.
One of the concerns that we have is providing services to citizens for law enforcement. You don't want somebody to be able to go home and bring up a law enforcement records management system from their home computer. Some of that is licensing, like for our case, the company we use is licensed per the workstation. So in our case, we provide applications as a service somebody who, just a general user, would be able to log into our standard gateway, but law enforcement can't log into that. They're not allowed, it's part of security groups. And so only law enforcement can log into the more stricter, how they control. That way we can limit access to the applications. That's one of the downsides in certain scenarios where Citrix is trying to allow you to work anywhere. You want to be able to utilize that, but yet some things you can't allow.
Yeah, so the problem being that sometimes if you're using a technology like this, you're allowing some type of remote access, but you still need to be able to rein that in and not let people just go home and have carte blanche access back into whatever they would need to have access into during their normal job function. So yeah, and most SSL VPNs and NAC solutions can work around that. So you guys have a solution that you did with looking for a pre-registered NetBIOS name and the registry key that gets loaded on the script. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
NAC
that's a
and
good solution.
SSL would not handle this scenario for you because if you're using, here, I can use Citrix receiver, I can get access to any of our systems, from my iPad or from my home computer.
Oh, okay, so you guys are using the outside gateway for it. Okay, all right, that makes sense then, yeah. Anything else here that you guys want to share? I always love hearing your real world stories. Okay, so that's the VDI stuff. Guest management, I didn't put logos up here because everybody and their duck is doing this. I'm not going to get into it too much, but it is worth mentioning that in terms of a BYOD solution, some of the important things to remember is if you're letting people bring stuff in, and you care about these people or you care about the devices they're bringing in, so they're not truly guests. And this is where I think this gets messy. We've always had kind of us and them, guest and us, right? And we don't have that anymore. There's like that I almost said 50 Shades of Grey. 10 different shades happening there. It's not black and white. So now we have us on our stuff, us on the stuff that you brought in that you own, that we're going to let you do stuff on the network with. You with a personally owned device that maybe you're listening to Pandora with. A true guest that came in and is just visiting is going to leave. A contractor that may be here for a short-term or a permanent contract position that's still not an employee, and therefore they're not necessarily using our equipment and or remember the domain yet. So we have these chunks of gray areas that's not black and white. It's not guest or not guest. And that's where things get a little bit messy. It's less messy if you understand and you can clearly articulate before you start talking about a guest management system what guests mean and what they need to have access to. So one of the things I think you guys, somebody up here mentioned before we started was, the wireless and deciding if they get on, what they're going to have access to once they get on. That takes the planning. That's the hard part. Getting the blinky lights to make your plan happen is really less of a problem. And understanding what that plan is the hard part. And that's always the hard part for everybody. So if you think that through, you're going to be good. But some of the things to worry about with guest management is, back to my statement of if you care about these people or these devices, so maybe they're your employees and they're accessing stuff, resources that are on your network or even off your network through a personally owned device, you still want to be careful with that. Considerations would be you don't want unencrypted wireless. And you might say, well, the applications are encrypted and this is encrypted and that's encrypted and that is fantastic and they all should be. But eventually that user is going to access something that's not natively encrypted. And it might not be a work tool, maybe it's Facebook or Twitter or something else that's social. And they've reused the password somewhere. So being able to do security with guest management, being able to provision some type of encryption, some key exchanges there when you're especially on wireless, that's pretty critical. And a lot of the guest management that you'll see, especially from the wireless vendors, Maru's here, Aruba bought somebody that does this too, but you'll see this kind of onboarding with security policy. So it's not, I don't mean MDM security policy, but you get onboarded, and traditionally if I want to do 8021X, I got to set this phone up to do it, it needs to be set up on the back end, and a lot of these guest managements, what they'll do is take this phone as a guest and let me come in, but still participate in the security and still connect to the network and then exchange keys and do 8021X and then we'll provision the device for it without an IT person having to come in to do it for you. So that's one of the key things to look at when you're looking at these solutions is when you're bringing people on, if they have personally owned devices, you may not have the opportunity to provision the appropriate security for it. Or it may blue screen when you do, who knows. But that's one of the key things to look for there. Then some of the other technologies, obviously a lot of the infrastructure and NAC vendors do have some other tools they plug in. When Juniper bought Funk, they got some tools there. Cisco has an agent too. Okay, I'm going to skip through this part very quickly. It is in here, I think you guys, I'm going to get Stephanie's slides so you'll have access to this. But evaluating the products here, I'll just show you the first couple so you know what's going on. But it really has to do with the order of evaluating. There are a lot of notes underneath the slides that you can't see right here. But it has to do with understanding your discovery functions and then moving to evaluation after that. So I'm going to stop right there and scoot to the end of this and leave you guys some time for questions. I'll put my contact information up there so you have it. So you guys have a lot of stuff you want to share, and I heard a lot of talking, and as I'm talking to you guys in the hallways, what else did we not hit here? Do you have questions about wireless provisioning and what to do with the networks? Do you have other questions that aren't covered here? Because like I said, this is not very technical, but there are things we have to think about.
One of the things we actually made me think about is right now we use Aruba internally, two SSIDs, guest and staff. And just thinking that staff is 802.1x, so laptops, that sort of thing. Go ahead and connect. If somebody wants to connect, on their iPad or whatever, if they're set up with department groups, policy, maybe, and all that kind of stuff, they just connect their personal device right in with their credentials to the 802.1x. And maybe how others are dealing with that, whether it's like a MAC address filter or something like that, in addition to 802.1x.
Yeah, so on the, and I'll give you mine, and then I'm going to repeat the question so you guys can see. I always hear different people doing different things here. So the question is, basically, if you have a kind of a staff network and then a guest, how do you keep, and the staff is 802.1x, how do you keep somebody from taking a personal device and doing the 2 or 3 button clicks that they need to make it 802.1x on wireless, using their Active Directory credentials, and then connecting? And my answer to that is, there are several different things you can do, but if you wanted to do it with just the resources you have without buying something else, you can certainly, in the policy that goes back into the radius policy, so whatever you have that's doing radius, there are connection request policies and network connection policies. So you can say that the user connecting has to be a member of whatever group, and you can say that the device they're connecting from has to be a member of the computer group. So that's one easy way. If that doesn't work for you, there's other tools from NAC vendors that do that. But I always hear, at least somebody has something cool that they do here. Anybody have anything else other than the Active Directory mapping? To keep, no? Okay. So any of the NAC vendors like Bradford do that.
So, can you make, I'm not that technical, but now, can you make an iPad part of your computer group?
You can, if you wanted to.
Are you talking about the computer group on the wireless side or in AD?
In whatever your directory services, you can add other devices to it there, yeah.
So we use web filtering for our, normal endpoints, but as we go to enable some mobile applications, I'm not sure how we would handle it. Like filters, virus,
Yeah, and you're saying use a web filter?
well, we use WebSense for our traditional endpoints.
Okay. Oh, you mean for
Going to a
phones?
mobile client, yeah, you're not going to have that same control.
Oh, good lord. What do you guys use? I know there are some people that have solutions, some vendors have solutions. So obviously computers go through the regular web filter. What do you do with phones that may be bypassing if they're not going wireless?
They should fall under your default policy in WebSense.
Well, you're talking about they're on the mobile network, right?
Mobile,
So
yeah.
they're not on wireless.
Gotcha.
Have you guys hit this? Do you disable you disable like the cellular connection when they're on the network? I've seen tools that can do that. Or has anybody seen an application or an MDM solution that loads on the phone and can do content filtering of some kind?
We've actually tested out, we're using Smoothwall for content filtering, and you can, well, I guess if you have access to the device, you can disable on an iPad, for example, you can disable Safari, and then Smoothwall has their own web browser. You can only maybe allow that web browser. That way that gets pushed back through Smoothwall. I want to say websites probably has one in the mobile app as well, but I know Smoothwall.
Yeah, a lot of the traditional proxy and filtering vendors are starting to make, apps for phones. They're probably not as full baked as a true solution like he's talking about. Again, there's so many different phones and platforms and versions, so the smooth wall is what he's saying that they use. Anything else?
I have an interesting comment I want to make. I've got a user I found out recently. We have an open, we have a internal wireless and external for vendors and public. I had one of my users recently tell me their supervisor wouldn't let her stream Pandora to her desktop. So she brought in her Best Buy tablet and was streaming Pandora using our wireless. I just don't really know how to educate people about what they're doing and how this works. And there's, it's very difficult to get them to understand what's really going on, the magic behind what they're doing.
Okay, so let me ask you the problem that we would need to solve there. Do we need to educate the manager? Do we need to educate the user? Should they not be doing that period? Or is that okay and that's a good workaround for them to do and it's allowed?
Well, from my point of view, honestly, I don't have a problem with using Pandora. I think the manager was trying to get her to work more. But
Was she having like dance parties in the hall and
yeah,
stuff?
I'm not quite sure what the deal was. But the honest truth is, the user, we need to have a better policy so that we know, because this is, it's the same bandwidth.
Yeah.
We only have a limited amount of pipe.
But yeah, if you have multiple people using Pandora, then it becomes a problem because you're using multiple using a
Yeah,
lot of bandwidth.
here's what I've told most organizations. And so the question has come up, how do we keep our users off of a guest Wi-Fi? And that's one answer and one need for some organizations. But then the next question is, why don't we just change the policy for the content filtering for guests to match what it is internally? And that is always my recommendation. If you have a guest network and you're doing content filtering on your regular network for your regular users, this one should be as restrictive, if not more. So what that does is, you're not giving anybody access to stuff they wouldn't have access to anyway. You're putting it through the same filtering system, so you have visibility into it. And then if you wanted to do additional things, like some kind of bandwidth throttling or application throttling on the guest network even further, you do that. So that preserves your bandwidth for the things you need it for, that are real. And it really discourages people from just hopping on that guest network to get wherever they want, because it's going to be slower. Not slow enough that you can't use it, but slower. That's been my solution. Have you guys done anything? Or are you just stretching back here?
No, I had a question.
Okay.
Well, hot to the question. Is there a, I'm sorry, did you want to answer to that?
No, I was just saying, that's my solution and my recommendation. I don't know if anybody else has done something different there.
We've left it up to the department head.
Okay.
Say, hey, this is a problem that people are bringing in their personal phones to do whatever, or bring in their laptops. Go right ahead until it starts to become an issue on the bandwidth side, then I'm not going to address it. But once it does, then I can go to the manager and say, hey, we either need to pay so much more money to have more bandwidth, or we need to start limiting these devices.
Right. So, and then the key is they're just monitoring it, so you know when that's a problem and you can go address it.
Exactly.
Okay. Anybody else have something for that? All right, I'm gonna move on to you.
I was just wondering if there was any issues you've seen or anyone else with devices that have been jailbroken.
I was waiting for somebody else to answer
Well,
that.
with a mobile device management software solution, you can prevent jailbroken devices to get on your network or enroll into your enterprise.
Yeah, and now, so what problem are we trying to solve there?
That was just to be proactive.
Okay, okay. I'm giggling because the other day I was in our air watch and I realized that one of my engineers' phones must be jailbroken because it keeps coming up with all these security warnings. So I don't recommend, for most people, I don't recommend allowing jailbroken phones because, you know, the manufacturers, I feel two ways about this. But from a business perspective, the manufacturers have put some controls in place that you can take advantage of. And the jailbroken phone is not letting you take advantage of those things. From a user perspective, jailbroken is great. I mean, I don't want to deal with it, manage it, I don't have time for it. But from an organization perspective, I think you're probably thinking along the right train of thought, and he's right. If you have an MDM solution, any of them, as far as I know, any of the main ones that I've looked at, will identify jailbroken phones or not allow them.
Sometimes people jailbreak their devices so they can, like say on a phone, you could make it a hotspot or tether it where, like say the carrier might disable that. And that's some of the reasons people, you know, or to add apps that are not paid for. So yeah, and that could cause problems on the network as well.
Developers do it, so they don't have to give Microsoft $100.
That's right.
All right, anything else, you guys? Yeah.
Just to speak to the jailbroken issue in your first slide and the content filtering, and something that we've dealt with a little bit, but with enabling users rather than disabling users, from web filtering perspective, we try to make a solution in user browser or on iOS devices, and that really crippled the end users because a lot of apps require Safari to be a default browser. So if you're going to use it, you really want to test it and check it and verify that the apps are going to work. And speaking of jailbreaking, the only way to get around that is to jailbreak, say, you know, an Apple iPad and force another browser, that browser to say the default browser. And, you know, then it's not safe for support. But, so that's an issue. Another way to filter, either content filtering, is like there's a global boxes and cloud-based filter. iOS lets you lock that down, you know, device level. So you know, filter all traffic whether it's wireless or
Okay.
See scary ones.
Yeah. Did you guys catch all that? Unless I had the questions about the content filter? Okay. All right, guys, I think we're coming up against time here, so thank you very much. I'm here for the rest of the day and night, so if you have questions, I'll let you know. Thank you.
Yeah, that's how I mark time. You know, how much talking.